All right, a big win for the special counsel, Jack Smith, who is investigating former President Trump and his role on January 6th. A judge has ordered former Vice President Mike Pence to testify about conversations that he had with Trump leading up to that day. The former vice president has so far declined to testify, even though he has said publicly, and he's written in his book about Trump endangering his life, and he says everyone else at the Capitol that day. In an interview yesterday, Pence told Newsmax that he hasn't decided if he is going to appeal this new ruling.
The requirements of my testimony going forward are a subject of our review right now, and I'll have more to say about that in the days ahead. Let me be clear. I have nothing to hide. I have a Constitution to uphold. We're currently speaking to our attorneys about the proper way forward, and as I said, we'll have a decision in the coming days.
So Pence joins a list of former Trump White House officials who have been ordered to testify, including Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. So let's bring in now Jamil Jaffer. He was associate counsel to President George W. Bush and the founder of executive of the national and executive, I should say, director of the National Security Institute at George Mason Law School. Thank you for joining us. Good morning to you.
Thanks for having me.
So what do you think? What are the odds? Is he going to end up testifying?
You know, I think it's very possible. What the judge found, and we don't have the actual ruling itself, unfortunately, but what the judge found was that the executive privilege, which is what protects the president's advice that he gets from his close advisors, his cabinet and the like, that didn't apply and didn't bar Vice President Pence's testimony. But he did find that the vice president, who plays this odd role between the executive and legislative branch, because under the Constitution, he's also the president of the Senate, he found that might limit some of the testimony that Vice President Pence has to give about the day of January 6th, when he didn't actually talk to President Trump, but his actions on that day, because he was acting as the president of the Senate in his capacity there.
Yeah, and we should note the reason we haven't seen it is because it's under seal. So none of us have seen it. This is all based on reporting that we have from sources. But based on that and the fact that Pence kind of already has written about what actually happened on January 6th, how problematic do you think it is for Trump if Pence is going to go and testify about the conversations they had leading up to that day?
Well, you know, Caitlin, I think it's potentially very problematic because, as we saw in the January 6th hearings that the committee held, there's a lot of information about what President Trump knew about what was going to happen at the Capitol that day, his role, you know, the conversations he had with staff, and of course, with Vice President Pence, he didn't have those conversations on that day, but there's a lot of information about the lead up to the events that might demonstrate that he had some level of culpability and that he wanted Congress to be unable to certify the election. He wanted Vice President to overturn the election. And all of that goes right at the issues that the special counsel Jack Smith is looking at.
Okay, unless I'm hearing wrong, you sort of alluded to what I want to play. This is Pence. This is him back in February arguing that the separation of powers would give him cover. Watch this.
I'm going to fight the Biden DOJ subpoena for me to appear before the grand jury because I believe it's unconstitutional and it's unprecedented. My fight is on the principle of separation of powers in the Constitution of the United States.
So I'm wondering what you think of that, because he still has the ability to appeal, and on what grounds do you think he has the best chance for that, the best defense?
Yeah, look, you know, it's interesting. Vice President Pence did not argue that the executive privilege bars his testimony. President Trump's lawyers made that argument. That would have been an argument he could have made, but he didn't. He did make the argument that this issue of separation of powers, him acting as the president of the Senate in his legislative capacity, even though he's the vice president of the United States, protects him, and that the speech or debate clause in the Constitution that protects members of Congress when they're acting in their official capacity, that protects him, and that ought to be upheld. So if he's already gotten something of a decent ruling, we don't know the details, but it sounds like the judge there gave him some room. If he wants to get that ruling to go further and give him more protection and prevent him from testifying at all, he might go to the Court of Appeals, but my guess is he probably moves forward and does testify, and then we'll see what happens. Of course, the hard thing for Vice President Mike Pence is he's thinking about running for president.
He is thinking about running for president. His team has kind of long conceded privately that they believed he'd have to testify about some stuff. But in the bigger picture that I think is important here is it's not just Pence. Trump's attorney went and testified in a separate investigation, the Docs case last week, without attorney-client privilege. Mark Meadows has to go testify in this January 6th case with that executive privilege. The idea that all these people around Trump are now being ordered to go and testify without these protections that typically some of them would have about their private conversations with him. remarkable.
No, that's exactly right, Caitlin. And look, these folks have a lot of information on what the president knew in the lead up to January 6th. On the day of. And so I do think that some of this testimony could be very damning to the president, who clearly, had a sense of what might take place that day. We heard that testimony during the January 6th hearings about the president, what he said about the folks around the mall and whether they had weapons or not, and that they weren't there to harm him. And then he directs them to the Capitol. There's a lot going on here that the special counsel can get into once he has access to testimony from folks like the ones you mentioned, Caitlin.
Yeah, it could be critical. Jamil Jaffer, thank you for your perspective this morning.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.